Imagine this, a snowy battlefield where Russia's once mighty winter shield cracks under its own weight. As blizzards howl and ice forms on tanks, could Putin's gamble with 710,000 troops turn into a frozen catastrophe, bankrupting the nation at $52 billion? The cold winds carry a dire warning. Is Moscow's empire about to shatter? What if I told you that this brutal season spells doom for an army unprepared for its own myth? Hearing the crunch of snow under boots, feeling the biting frost-numb fingers, and smelling the metallic tang of disabled machinery, that's the reality echoing from Eastern Europe's front lines. As winter descended fiercely, Russia's relentless strikes crippled Ukraine's energy grid daily, plunging cities like Kyiv into darkness. Blizzards raged, making repairs a desperate struggle against nature's fury. Yet Ukraine has weathered harsher freezes over 4 punishing years, emerging tougher. For Russia, though, the Kremlin's propaganda, claiming winter as Moscow's invincible ally, crumbled when reality struck in 2026. The frosty grip didn't shield invaders like fabled tales promised. Instead, it detonated a grenade in their grip. While Ukrainians braced against the chill as a stern challenge, Russian forces faced a lethal equation: snow melts, but funds might vanish first, leaving tanks stranded in a $52 billion financial void. From that icy betrayal, Putin echoed Napoleon's folly, surging 710,000 soldiers into Ukraine's frozen embrace. How do you command such a horde amid shriveling budgets and merciless weather? Buckling under the strain sounds the death knell. Violating history's iron law, never deploy forces beyond logistical reach, Russian leaders inflated frontline numbers by 20% for a winter push. On maps, it looked like a crimson tide, but on ground zero, it became a chaotic throng, certain to succumb to the freeze. Winter war triples demands for fuel, food, and gear over summer's ease. Cram more troops into overextended veins, and you court chaos. Imagine the stench of failing generators, the sharp crack of freezing engines. That's Putin's logistical hell. Peering into Pokrovsk's deadlock, the full horror unfolds through a magnifying lens. Months of human waves failed to seize it, but bulking up troops geometrically escalated burdens. Uniforms, heat sources, power units, and fuel deliveries became wartime impossible tasks. There, on the absolute edge, Russia's defeat ignited. Smartly, Ukraine pivoted strategy, slice supply routes rather than clash directly. Why assail steel beasts when fuel convoys are the real lifeline? Slick, icy paths hobbled Russian trucks, while sharp blasts of FPV drones pinpointed vulnerable transports with unerring accuracy. A BM-10 tank, impervious as legend, needs ignition at -20°C. Fail, and crews endure searing cold, blinded optics glazing over. Deprived of energy, battalions transform from warriors to costly scrap, motionless in the drifts. Reports from Kucherov Yar paint the grim aftermath. Cut off from sustenance, troops surrendered not to bullets but to hypothermia's grip and immobilized vehicles. Outdated Soviet relics tried warming trenches. But thermal drones spotted them like beacons in twilight, their breaths fogging the air with futile warmth. Quantity over quality crashed headlong into tech and physics, a doctrine's ruin. 710,000 aren't Moscow's strength but a voracious drain, depleting daily. Soldiers battled tangible frost, while Kremlin minds confronted emptier coffers' ominous drain. Napoleon decreed wars thrive on finance, tripled. Putin possesses none now. War's price soared astronomically, state income plummeted. Stark data proves collapse. By 2025's end, a $52 billion shortfall loomed, forecasted to breach $70 billion next year. Not imbalance, but national spine fracture. Burning $1 billion daily, Putin drained capacity. Revenues shriveled, oil and gas earnings down 34%, a $3.5 billion hit per price waiver. Depleting reserves plugged gaps, yet dismally finite. Economy ensnared in debt webs, inflation spiraled despite hikes. War's blaze scorched living standards, Putin chose boots over factories, taxing heavily, slashing aid, devaluing currency. Deeper recession than Soviet fall crippled basics. Systemic breakdown halted. When fronts and finances collide, regime survival teeters. Military doctrine and economy flopped together, a double crux no power endured. The facts: $52 billion hole and 710,000 frozen sentinels. No reserves to invert fate, but deeper peril, funds impotence. Rubble floods can't summon Western chips or defenses. Isolated stalemate breeds weakness. Superpower claims ring hollow, ally reliance morph necessity. Bartering oil cheaply, begging arms from afar signaled erosion. Home cracks worsen risks. Soldiers kin grieved returning husks or voids, urban dwellers pinched by costs. Tangible anguish, caverns in kitchens, wallets hollowing. Narratives crumbled, stranded vehicles at -20, runaway inflation unveiled lies. Russia's future squandered, the regime's facade melts like ice under sunlight, but will cracks widen into revolution's roar? This winter marks a critical turning point in the ongoing conflict. It begins with a simple yet devastating truth: the Russian military's most fundamental rule of modern warfare has been broken. Ukrainian intelligence and Western sources confirm it: never send an army into battle that logistical support cannot sustain. When supply lines fail, even the mightiest tanks turn into useless piles of frozen metal. In recent weeks, Russia doubled down, increasing its forces on the front by 20%. The total reached 710,000 troops. At first glance, this number seems intimidating, a sweeping wave of soldiers ready to conquer. But on the ground, the reality is stark: an unmanageable crowd doomed to freeze, shattered by the brutal Russian winter. The harsh truth of winter warfare is unforgiving: it requires triple the calories, fuel, and equipment just to keep soldiers alive. Adding hundreds of thousands more to an already overstretched supply chain? That's a recipe for disaster. Putin's strategy became his nightmare. To truly grasp the gravity, let's peer into the situation on the Pokrovsk front. For months, Russia relied on human wave tactics, trying to seize this vital area. But each additional soldier exponentially increased the logistical burden. Winter uniforms, portable stoves, generators, all need fuel. Most critically, fuel must reach the front line to power generators and vehicles. This is where Russia's biggest failure begins. Ukrainian forces see the bloated Russian army as an opportunity. Their plan? Cut off supply lines rather than fight head-on. Instead of attacking tanks directly, they target the very lifeline of the Russian forces, their fuel trucks. On icy, snowy roads, Russian logistics are incapacitated. Fuel trucks lose maneuverability. Modern tanks like the T-90 require starting engines at -20 degrees, without that, they freeze solid. In the cold darkness, their optical systems fog up, rendering them blind. Ukrainian drone operators, equipped with precise FPV technology, hunt down vulnerable fuel and ammo trucks behind enemy lines, striking where it hurts most. The fatal flaw becomes clear. A battalion deprived of fuel isn't a fighting force, but a cold, immobile crowd of frozen machinery. Failures in logistics mean surrender, not because of lack of ammunition, but because their vehicles have become useless, victims of the relentless winter. The consequences are horrifying. Reports from the Kachar-Ryvyar region confirm this grim reality: units cut off from supplies surrender without a fight, not due to a lack of shooting, but from freezing and hypothermia. Soldiers, often poorly equipped, huddle in trenches from the Soviet era, trying desperately to stay warm amid the howling wind and biting snow. This showcases how Russia's outdated doctrine, prioritizing quantity over quality, is crashing against modern technology and the unforgiving physics of winter. The so-called thousands of soldiers are increasingly just thousands of frozen corpses or immobilized metal. Meanwhile, Moscow's earnings, crucial for maintaining the war effort, continue to bleed away. Russia's treasury, once flush with oil profits, is rapidly depleting. In 2024, the deficit hit $34.5 billion. By 2025's first 10 months, the gap soared to $52 billion. Experts warn 2026 could see this figure reach $70 billion, a catastrophic financial fracture. Putin's war machine is burning through a full $1 billion daily in Ukraine. Yet, their revenues crash faster. Oil and gas incomes, the backbone of the regime's war budget, have fallen by 34% in just a year. Each dip in global prices cuts billions in earnings. Recently, a single drop erased $3.5 billion overnight. Moscow's solution? Use the nation's reserve funds, but they are running dry. The so-called National Welfare Fund is being drained to cover the shortfalls. The crisis on the streets mirrors this economic collapse. Inflation skyrockets, wages stagnate, and basic goods soar in price. Putin's model of war-driven economy morphs into a crushing debt trap. The middle class shrinks and erodes. Taxes rise, social programs are cut. Citizens feel the pinch in every paycheck and store. The country is sliding into a recession deeper and more complex than the Soviet collapse. This winter, the regime's survival strategies are failing spectacularly. Their military and economy are collapsing simultaneously. This crisis is a double bind. Can Russia sustain a frozen, starving army while their economy unravels? The dire truth is clear. The money is vanishing, and even if they print more rubles, it won't fix the core problems. They are cut off from advanced Western technology, microchips, and energy systems. Moscow's dependence grows. They sell oil at cut-rate prices to China and beg North Korea for ammunition. This external reliance hints at a dangerous shift. Russia is slipping into dependency beyond simple geopolitical isolation. Their global standing diminishes as they struggle for survival. Inside Russia, families mourn frozen bodies of soldiers abandoned on icy trenches. Cities suffer from inflation and hardship. The war's cost is not abstract anymore, it's in every kitchen, every wallet, every street. Putin's claims of control are collapsing under the weight of reality. Tanks sit idle, fuel lines frozen, a stark image of defeat. His once assertive empire now teeters on collapse, crippled by frozen tanks and shattered finances. This is how the winter of 2025 could really be Russia's undoing. The question remains, can anything save a regime that has already lost its grip, both militarily and economically? The answer may lie in the brutal Colt's final victory. Previously, we saw how Russian forces, overwhelmed by winter's brutal grip, are transforming their advanced tanks into mere frozen statues. Without proper fuel and modern equipment, they freeze in place, victims of their own logistical failures. Reports from the Kachar-Rivyar region paint a grim picture. Units cut off from supplies surrender without a fight, not because they ran out of ammo, but because their vehicles froze solid, and soldiers succumbed to hypothermia. Lacking modern gear, Russian soldiers are desperately trying to stay warm in trenches filled with outdated Soviet remnants. Ukrainian drone operators with thermal cameras see them clearly, like flickering flames in the darkness. This reveals how Russia's strategy of sheer numbers has crumbled against the unforgiving physics of winter and cutting-edge technology. What was once seen as unstoppable, 710,000 troops, has become a living logistical nightmare. Each day, they need food, fuel, and supplies, but these resources are running out faster than ever. The battlefield is cold, but the real danger lies in Moscow's treasuries. They are drying up. The legendary wartime rule of survival, spoken by generals like Napoleon, demanded endless money. Now, Putin faces a scarcity he cannot ignore. The costs of this war have skyrocketed, reaching levels that threaten Russia's very stability. The numbers tell the truth, no propaganda can hide the disaster. In 2024, the budget deficit was already $34.5 billion. Management claimed it was manageable. But by the first 10 months of 2025, this deficit exploded to $52 billion. Experts warn that by the close of 2026, it could reach $70 billion, carving deep into Russia's financial core. The once robust reserve funds are draining fast. Oil and gas profits, a lifeline for Putin's war effort, are shrinking. Compared to last year, revenue from energy exports has dipped by a third, leaving the Kremlin scrambling for cash. Every drop in oil prices slashes billions from the budget, forcing Moscow to empty the National Welfare Fund, a financial lifeline that can't last forever. This economic hemorrhage is felt on the streets. Ordinary Russians see their pennies shrinking, their stores raising prices daily. Inflation spirals beyond official figures. The war budget becomes a debt trap, mortgaging the country's future. Taxes rise, social programs are cut, and people feel the squeeze in every part of life. Russia's middle class trembles on the edge of collapse, caught between war demands and economic ruin. Now, consider this, a nation that can't feed its own army, whose currency falters every day, how can it survive? The illusion of superpower strength is shattering. Moscow's dependence on allies like China and North Korea is no longer a choice but a necessity. They are forced to sell oil at loss and request ammunition from nations long considered enemies. The situation inside Russia is even direr. Families mourn fallen soldiers returned in coffins or not at all. Citizens face inflation-induced hunger and rising living costs. The Kremlin's grand narrative, that everything is proceeding as planned, crumbles under the weight of reality. Tanks left in icy fields with empty fuel tanks and soldiers freezing in trenches tell a different story from official declarations. Putin's colossal miscalculations threaten to unravel Russia from within. This winter may be the turning point, when the mighty empire's facade cracks beyond repair. The question remains, how much longer can a regime sustain this catastrophic convergence of military failure and economic collapse? Or are we witnessing the final act of a superpower in decline? The crisis is deeper than it seems. In 2024, Russia's budget deficit was $34.5 billion. The Kremlin insisted it was manageable. However, by late 2025, this shortfall soared to $52 billion. Experts warn it could reach $70 billion by next year. The financial foundation is cracking, revealing a collapse beyond mere figures, a full-blown failure threatening Russia's future. Putin's government is burning through a staggering $1 billion daily on Ukraine. But now, they face an impossible dilemma: they can no longer finance this brutal war. The stakes are rising. Meanwhile, the main sources fueling the war, oil and gas revenues, are vanishing. By November 2025, profits from these resources had shrunk by 34%, nearly a third compared to the previous year. Each dip in the global oil prices slashes billions from Moscow's coffers. Just recently, a single price downturn wiped out $3.5 billion overnight. Desperate, the Kremlin is draining the National Welfare Fund, the country's financial safeguard. But that fund isn't endless. Every dollar spent on war deepens the economic hemorrhage. The entire system is bloodied and battered on the streets. Inflation soars beyond official reports, crushing ordinary citizens. Efforts by the central bank to raise interest rates only stoke the fires. War spending has turned Russia's economy into a ticking debt trap. Future generations are mortgaged to pay today's bills. The middle class faces imminent collapse. The government is caught between two deadly choices: supply warm winter gear for soldiers or fund everyday workers' wages in Moscow's factories. Putin's decision seems clear: he sacrificed his own people. Taxes are climbing, social programs are slashed, and the ruble continues to weaken against the dollar. Everyday life deteriorates. This crisis isn't just economic. It's systemic. The core functions of the state grind to a halt. The entire machinery of governance struggles to operate. Now, the broader picture emerges. This winter marks a pivotal point. For the first time, Moscow's strategies are unraveling. The military doctrine, built on strength, independence, and resilience, fails against the reality of freezing tanks and shattered logistics. The Russian economy, once a superpower's engine, stalls under pressure. The question lingers: how long can this go on? How many more soldiers will freeze or fall? How much longer can a nation sustain itself when its coffers are empty, its soldiers stranded, and its once proud identity collapsing? As the cold intensifies, so does the silent scream of a nation at the brink. The winter's fury exposes the cracks in Russia's armor, cracks that threaten to shatter the regime itself. What's next could forever change the face of this once mighty power. In the depths of Russia's collapsing economy, a recession looms larger than the fall of the Soviet Union. It's no mere financial dip. State functions grind to a halt, paralyzed by systemic breakdown. Imagine the air thick with the acrid smell of burning fuel, the distant rumble of engines silenced by bitter cold. Picture soldiers huddled in trenches, their breath fogging the air like ghosts rising from the earth, frostbite nibbling at fingers that once gripped rifles. This flashback haunts the present: men like my uncle, conscripted into endless winter drills in the 90s, shivering under thin blankets as snow blanketed the Siberian taiga, the sharp crack of branches snapping under ice storm weight echoing through the night. Now, zoom in on the clash where these twin disasters collide. For Russia, this winter shreds illusions. It's no fleeting snowstorm or passing cash crunch. It's the brutal exposure of a survival tactic that's shattered irreparably. Could a regime's core strategy crumble like ice under a tank tread? We're witnessing a nation where military might and fiscal engine fail in unison. Enter the double-bind traps, sustaining a frostbitten force abroad while a populace starves at home. No empire survives this vice long. Concrete evidence slams home, the $52 billion budget void, those 710,000 troops braving sub-zero hell. Resources to flip the script? Wiped out, leaving Putin trapped in his own web. Yet the direst wound isn't dwindling rubles, it's their futility on the battlefield. Print all the rubles, Kremlin, but they won't buy Western chips or shields for supply veins. This deadlock exposes Russia, naked and weak internationally. Superpower boasts ring hollow, unable to nourish troops or shield currency. Once choice, reliance on Beijing and Pyongyang morphs into desperate life support. Oil sold to China at a shaving loss. Ammunition begged from North Korea. Is this descent into utter dependence, exiled from global ties? The home fracture's deepest, most perilous. Families cradle sons' frozen remains, or mourn empty coffins, while urban folk choke on inflation's stranglehold. War's toll? Felt in every cupboard's emptiness, wallet's lightness, streets' decay. Kitchen gas burners flickering out midwinter, the metallic tang of frozen pipes bursting. Touch the decay, rubble eroding against dollars, purchasing power crumbling like dry earth. Satirical question, how does a dictator humiliate his own people into begging allies that once feared him? What twisted fate awaits if Putin squanders deeper into this abyss? Will the people's silent rebellion boil over, or will winter's grip shatter his illusion of control forever? The Kremlin's reassuring story has shattered. Tanks lie stranded without fuel in -20-degree cold, supplies frozen solid. Inflation has soared to 20%, squeezing citizen wallets tighter than ever before. Putin has gambled away Russia's future, wasting its strength on a war it cannot sustain. Now, both its armies and its economy are on the brink of collapse. This is how history begins to turn. The fragile system is trembling, signaling imminent disaster. For Ukraine, surviving this winter is a symbol of resilience, an epic stand against adversity. But for Russia? Surviving this season seems an impossible task, both militarily and financially. The legendary Russian winter no longer favors them, it's speaking a different language now. Amidst this chaos, a harsh reality emerges. The mighty 710,000 soldiers caught in a frozen wasteland face a crippling supply nightmare. A thunderous $52 billion budget deficit rattles the very foundations of the Kremlin's empire. The iconic Russian bear is no longer dormant. Instead, it's starving, trembling, unable to emerge from its icy den. As the war drags on, Moscow's remaining resources might be just enough to buy betrayal, not salvation. The message is clear, winter has arrived, and the reckoning is near. But the true toll isn't just in military losses or financial ruin. It's felt deep in the city streets, in the freezing suburbs of Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Novosibirsk. The front's logistical chaos mirrors the collapsing infrastructure back home, what we call urban hypothermia. Originally built during Soviet days. Russia's aging heating systems can't handle the strain. Last winter, pipes burst in Podolsk, leaving 150,000 people shivering in their homes. That disaster? Just a preview of what's to come this winter. The smell of melting metal, the biting cold seeping through cracked walls, and the distant, relentless hum of frozen pipes all signal one thing: Russia's survival is slipping away, piece by piece. As the cold infiltrates every corner, the question remains, will Moscow's crumbling infrastructure survive the next storm, or will the cold finally unveil the empire's true weakness? The crisis in Russia extends far beyond the battlefield. It's a silent collapse of core systems that once kept the nation running smoothly. The remnants of Soviet-era infrastructure are breaking down, and recent winter reveals just how fragile this empire truly is. The nation's energy grid, transportation networks, and even its skies are crumbling, exposing the cracks in Moscow's carefully crafted image of strength. Imagine a city plunged into darkness. The icy air seeps through broken pipelines, ancient heating systems groan and crack as they struggle to operate. Last winter, a burst in Podolsk left hundreds of thousands shivering in homes without warmth, a grim glimpse of what awaits this season. The Putin administration diverted funds meant for modernization to fund missile programs aimed at Ukraine, ignoring the aging system's urgent needs. Western sanctions have dried up spare parts. Repairs? Impossible. The boilers are frozen, the pumps useless. Citizens will soon face bitter cold, but their leaders continue to spin tales of resilience, tales that mean nothing when their stomachs rumble and their homes turn to ice. The blackout is more than discomfort. It risks igniting civil unrest, faster than setbacks on the front lines. The nation's power to endure comes from its infrastructure, but it's failing. Power outages are creeping in, and municipal chaos looms. The fabric of daily life unravels, exposing the true cost of economic and strategic decay. Beyond heating, the crisis spreads to the transport network, a vital artery for survival. Russia's railways, once a symbol of connectivity, are teetering on the brink. Sanctions have halted the supply of high-quality ball bearings used in wagon wheels. Chinese-made replacements falter in the brutal winter, breaking down under the frosty load. This isn't just a logistical nightmare for civilians, the military relies on these rails too. Supplies for troops, weapons, and strategic reserves are at risk of grinding to a halt. The freight lines are clogged, and the entire supply chain frays by the day. The skies aren't spared either. Russian airlines are cannibalizing their fleets, taking parts from one aircraft to repair another, each flight a gamble with safety. As planes become fewer, the fragile link between remote mining towns and the capital weakens. Flights are disappearing, and the empire's grip on its far-flung territories loosens with every delayed or cancelled journey. A disintegrating empire from the core to the edges is no longer just theory, it's happening now. In the shadows of winter's icy grip, the cracks widen. This isn't just about freezing pipes or broken trains, it's the unraveling of a power that once seemed unstoppable. The question remains, how long can a nation survive when its own backbone begins to fracture beneath the cold, both literal and figurative? The safety of Russian flights has turned into a tense game of chance. As winter deepens, icy runways and frozen hydraulic systems ramp up risks for aircraft in poor condition. The recent delay of nearly 300 flights at Moscow's Vnukovo airport highlights a crisis growing more severe. Boarding a plane here now feels as dangerous as stepping onto the front lines. Economic desperation drives risky decisions. The Kremlin is gambling on dangerous fronts, both at home and offshore. To replace shrinking oil revenues, an aging fleet of vessels, known as the Shadow Fleet, sits uninsured and deteriorating in the Baltic Sea. These scrap vessels are a ticking time bomb, their presence threatening both the environment and regional stability. During fierce winter storms, smuggling using these vessels risks catastrophic spills and environmental disaster. Putin's reliance on energy as a weapon has backfired badly. The seas, just like winter itself, show no mercy. An accident involving one of these vessels could trigger sanctions, blockades, halting all exports of Russian oil and gas. What was once a strategic move now seems more like a reckless gamble with the entire region's ecology. The picture emerging is less a military analysis and more a perilous risk report. Meanwhile, the Russian economy teeters on the edge. A $52 billion deficit looms large, fueled by plummeting energy revenues, down by one-third, with losses of billions from falling global prices. Oil profits declined sharply, leaving the treasury more depleted every day. The government is burning through its emergency funds, desperately cobbling together funds to keep the war alive. On the ground, soldiers and citizens face its dire effects. Infrastructure fails, and the cold seeps into bones and buildings alike. Kremlin officials prepare to report victory, but the truth is far uglier. The winter of 2026 might be remembered as the ultimate freezing point for the Russian Federation. Its economy shrinks, its military's logistical chains break, and its dream of empire dissolves under the weight of cold reality. This is no longer a simple conflict. It's a crumbling empire, fighting to stay afloat amid economic collapse and environmental calamities. Russia's grand plans have shattered against the icy battleground, their only weapons turned against them, and winter silence closing in. The power has disappeared from cities, and heaters are failing. The nation faces a chilling truth: there's no money left to keep the lights on or warmth flowing. This winter isn't just harsh weather, it's an endless nightmare consuming Russia from within. Soon, silence may strike, an eerie pause that signals the regime's fall. The battlefield has shifted inward, into the frozen core of Russia itself. The real war isn't fought in Ukraine anymore, it rages inside the icy depths of the nation's heart. Prepare for what comes next. The endgame has begun.